of Equilibrium. We've had amazing discussions from our panelists, from our guests, from Dr. Deji. Dr. Deji last week came from the medical perspective, um, how people, if they're not careful, could unduly give attention to what they shouldn't give attention to at the expense of what they should give attention to. We also saw how the negative emotions that has been ravaging people in the world has had a lot of effect on employees, it's had effect on organizations, it's had effect on marriages, it's had effect on couples, to mention a few. We also saw 2 weeks ago, Reverend Victor Adeyemi also came up to explain to us why there was a disciple in the team of Jesus Christ. Jesus was known as the healer himself. However, I had Luke, the medical doctor, in his team, and it looks like a paradox. Okay, so if I'm the healer, then why do I have to carry a medical doctor? But the truth be told, there are certain things that a medical doctor can do that a therapist cannot do. I mean, it was a lot of joy for me a few weeks ago when the Nigerian Medical Association reached out to me to say they needed me to speak to medical professionals about the impact, the negative emotional impact on medical practitioners. It was very, very honoring a call, and I look forward to that. But what I'm saying in essence is we have a responsibility to pay attention to the required issues that we have. I was saying to someone this evening, there's so much noise about the COVID-19. I mean, there are several deaths, several this number, that number. But you know, there is a noiseless effect of COVID-19 that no one is talking about. I call it the noiseless effect because when emotional bullets are shot during or were being shot during the pandemic, the reality is no one saw the bullets. No one could say, "Oh, that was a bullet that hit me below the belt. That was one that hit me in the hand." No one sees emotional bullets. That's the reality. But yet the impact, they last a lot longer than the physical impact. So this is always where I make the illustration. Sometimes when you have a wound on your hand, show it to your friends, show it to your siblings. Also, I have a wound. Then you begin to monitor it. 2 days after, has the wound healed? 3 days, but there is a wound. But the challenge with the pandemic is that it has emotional effects on the people, on the nation, on employees, and yet it doesn't make so much noise. So this night, we're going to continue to attempt to deal with the issues, the fallout. Thank you, Awa, for joining. For the fallout of the effect of the pandemic on organizations, the effect of the pandemic on individuals, the effect of the pandemic on couples, the effect of the pandemic on the society as a whole. I said last week, I'm very certain that out of the billions of naira that have been allocated for this particular pandemic, I'm sure that none of little or nothing will be allocated to mental health. However, mental health challenges have a huge impact in this particular narrative that we're looking into. So tonight we're going to be having was an amazing mental health coach, won several awards. I respect her work so dearly. She's been of capacity to deal with paranoid, deal with emotional issues, negative, disempowering thoughts, and all of that. So all of that is what we're unpacking tonight, so that we can have. Our is also for staying on. Okay, so those are the issues that we're going to look at today. We have a lot to unpack from the. Okay. So I think it's a bit better now. Okay, so Awa, please, can you help me resend your request so that I can get you connected? Thank you, Pastor Eddie, for joining. Hey, my brother, Ayo Alex, thank you for joining tonight. Okay, so I'll wait your request so I can add you on. People will catch up with us as we progress. But the most important thing is to be able to make content available at this time where a lot of people are living in denial, a lot of people are living in deception, a lot of people are living in I mean, they're still paranoid as I'm speaking to you. Some people are wallowing with anxiety disorder. They are with, I mean, all of the negative emotions on the spectrum is just still there. And we're quick to sweep things under the carpet. And the challenging thing about it is that the statistics does not okay. In Sheyada Valley, all the way from the United Kingdom. Thank you. Aim is to okay, I was right here. My desire, my aim is to help. I mean, the major religion to be able to give us that balance to say, hey, there's nothing wrong when you have issues to seek your spiritual help and also to find professional help. Because I believe that the beauty of life is collaboration. I believe that no one has it all. I believe that in this particular challenge, we have medical doctors that need to do their job. We have people who are in the spiritual space who needs to do their job. Also, we have therapists, psychotherapists, people in the mental health space who also need to do their job. Otherwise, good to see you tonight. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, Coach Shinji. Thank you so
Awesome.
much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for honoring our invitation. It's been a while that we spoke, but I mean tonight we're making that happen. All right. So because I don't usually want this to exceed an hour, I want you to hit the ground. What's your perspective to this particular topic? What's the place of? I want you to also tilt from the Muslim perspective. I also want you to look into your role as a mental health coach and all of that. So the floor is yours, Awa.
So thank you very much. I feel like it's just so basic. Like I look at it as something so basic. I find that a lot of times when it comes to very, very everyday issues, we tend to
Yeah.
think that, we don't give a lot of things second thoughts. We just go about, we do those kinds of things. But for some reason, when it comes to issues regarding mental health and some other aspects of our lives, then we want to defer to
Yeah.
religion, and we want to take away that personal responsibility for some reason. And I always tell people your mental health is just really how you think and feel and how you behave. So it's just those three things: is your feelings, your thoughts, and your how those affects your behavior. And for me, that is as simple as it is, because the moment you let somebody know that it's about your thoughts, your everyday thoughts, and it's about just your emotions, they go up and down, react to different things differently, and it's how all of that can affect your behavior. It becomes less abstract to every single person, because I think sometimes what happens with the conversation is that we lose a lot of people when we start talking about mental health as disorders, too early. And then all of a sudden, like, no, I don't live with that and all of that. So I'm just gonna like step back, and maybe this conversation is not for me. So I think we need to be very proactive about taking a wellness approach to mental health, so that people are more included in the conversation. And even from a religious perspective, I mean, with Islam, it's always that, our health is like an amana. So that is like a trust. So whatever we've been given, our body, our organs, our skin, everything is that it's a trust from Allah. And Allah has given it to you so that you take care of that and you return to Him. So you have a personal responsibility to your Creator to ensure that your mind, body, spirit is well taken care of. So even from that fundamental perspective, you are not supposed to neglect any aspect of what has been given to you by Allah, So for me, it's really just as simple as that. It is, we have been given different aspects of health, and we have a personal responsibility to ensure that we are able to, balance it, take care of it, do what we need with the available knowledge and resources that have been given from God or from human beings, or whatever, care of ourselves. So that's really how I see it.
Okay. So I hear you about how you feel, how you think, and how you behave. If you're going to look at your practice in the last few years, have you met anyone who felt seeking professional help will hinder their faith, or someone who feels because they are faith-filled, they don't want to speak professional help?
No, I've come across a lot of people like that, who feel like, you know, so I remember one lady telling me, like, if I go and seek profession, let God down, you know. And it's quite interesting because it's sort of like it's a
Please come
conditioning,
again.
like
You said what?
if
A lady came and said she let God down or something.
yeah, that she should let God down, I should be letting God down, you know. So, and you know, it
Wow.
really touched, like, oh, how sweet, like you must really think you're so powerful. Like, I mean, I guess we all are somehow, you know. And it was quite interesting, you know. Like, again, it is down to how we've been socialized to think about religion. And you know, in this side of the world, we are very religious people, and sadly
Very,
that
very.
cannot be a very positive thing. Sometimes that has the power to take away every form of critical thinking that we have, and we're able to apply in other aspects of our lives. But for some reason, the moment religion is thrown into something, we just sort of lose our balance. And, you know, it's just that thing that sort of destabilizes our average Nigerian. So, yes, I have definitely seen that. And, you know, it's always quite interesting to good also to ensure
So how did
that
you
you meet
handle
such
it?
people where they are. So there are some that I've handled from an Islamic perspective. So Christians, for example, I mean, much work. And I guess for the Muslims, it feels because they know, obviously, Muslims, so it's almost like the validation that is sort of need. But for the Christians, it just feels like just one of conversation that I just need to do in terms of, you know, like, okay, you know what, and it's okay to talk about it. And look, we've done all of these things. You can read our page, you can look at all this, and you know, they look at it as I use more of the social aspect to get them comfortable, to warm them up, and to ensure that, okay, I can now ease them into getting some sort of professional. It's more of we need to, like, it's almost like you need to bring something. Like, I know you're a Muslim, but you need to be quite interesting, because the truth is, a lot of times I don't even need to go deep into quoting things. Sometimes I tell people, like, I don't feel the need to quote anything, because it's quite interesting, because it's only when it comes to this aspect that we're actually telling people to quote stuff, and then you're like, well, I'm not quoting anything, come you know, if you're having, you know, some other health issue, how do you, so it is not so much about the release, what we've been told about the condition itself. And we've been told that, oh, this condition is, you know, it's maybe a spirit, Jesus used to cast out these demons and all of those things, and you know, all of that, it's the conditioning. It's separate from the religion can stand, but then it's how we've been socialized to think about the condition itself. And so I always try to probe them from that place of, you know, just logic and thinking, just to say, okay, so how come you don't think like this when it comes to malaria or typhoid, or if somebody has cancer or this? How is it
Thank
that you
you.
only think of this when it comes to your mind and all of that? Is that not part of your body? Don't you think your brain is an organ? Don't you feel like you need to, you know, and then, you know, they begin to lose, you know, the battle, like, okay, no problem, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I can relate to that very well, you know, because this is one of the conversations of one of the ladies who said, oh, once I begin to do professional health, then I've lost. Do you have a medical doctor? She said, oh, yes, I have a medical doctor. In fact, I have a gynecologist. I have a dentist. I said, yes. So why would you now give an area of your life where you are not a professional to a doctor? And second, guess why you should seek professional help with mental health issues, with your emotions. You know, just like you said, there's a lot of a lot of people, I mean, mystify mental health issues. They make it look like it's something that is not normal. They make it look like, in fact, there was a time a cousin of mine called me someone that packs smart people, you know, because in their mind, they think that once you walk in the mental health space, you are liable to attract people with mental health issues. And for them, mental health means someone picking paper by the roadside, someone who isn't. So from your own perspective, how do we create more awareness? I've tried to do a couple of things with organizations, with the employee assistance program, but you say I still find a bit of a brick wall. You know, I was privileged to speak to about 95 HR managers and CEOs about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I was saying to them, so they're asking me what do they think they should do. I said, well, my own suggestion is to ensure that there's part of their CSR budget, they create therapy hubs, you know, so that they can pay a therapist on an agreement to say, okay, once or twice a week, We have this therapy hub as a donation to the community where we have our office, or that's one. Then also to ensure that employee-assisted programs have more attention to mental health issues. I mean, I don't know your perspective about that. But one, what do you think organizations should do to increase their awareness? What do you think communities, leaders should do? Conversation that does not make one inferior to the other, and that does not make one superior to the other.
Right. Okay. So that's a lot of questions in one. So I'll start with just the awareness aspect of it. I'll start with that.
Yeah.
The general awareness. I feel like everybody has a personal responsibility. First, there is a lot of conversation. I mean, there's the role of social media, because social media is very instant and it's very viral. It bridges the gap. So before you wake up Monday and you say you want to go into the community, you could have tweeted and then like 1,000 people have seen it, and all of that. So I think there's a personal responsibility for all of us to start having these conversations in our spaces, whether it's digital spaces or physical spaces. So whatever it is, we need to start bringing up these conversations and be having these conversations often enough, because the only way we break all of this down, and I'm a big advocate of conversations, even though for a lot of people it just seems like talk. I generally work off the idea that we need to normalize something. In order for you to normalize something, you need to talk about it often enough that it stops creating that shock effect on people. Because what happens a lot of times is that you talk about mental health like, it sparks one kind of thing. But now a lot of times, and what has been happening over the last couple of years, now you talk about mental health or depression or suicide, and people are, they feel very interested. It's not like, oh my God, it's always like, hey, they are curious. They want to know more, tell me more, because now people are realizing that the information they used to have may not necessarily be correct or accurate and things like that. So now they want to learn. So I think that's number one, and us, everybody understanding that they have a sense of responsibility. And what we don't know that we're doing is that we're creating safe spaces for people who have about the extreme cases. It's the everyday cases. It's the everyday you and I who can say, oh, I did have this, and then sudden that further bravery talking is still seems very abstract to a lot of people. I'm sure that's what you were trying to talk about. Brick walls. It's not human enough for a lot of people to take it in, because in order for something to be human, people need to see it, they need to feel it, they need to interact with it. So that is why a lot of times people still feel very disconnected with the topic of mental health or the consequences of people who live with mental health conditions, because they haven't felt that experience in the space of people like us, gone through the powerful part. A lot of times we tend to neglect a lot. I think third thing that perhaps I was in terms of, let me now bring it to organizations, as you did say something about organizations doing something within their communities and all of that. But I think if we do want number one, I feel like number three is easier, not even for community. It's any organizations find it a problem working with me, because I'm like, I'm not doing tokenism. It's not here. I'm not here for you to do like, just take this and go and do something. Let's be all right. You need to understand why this is important. And the first way you can prove is that you make it a part of your internal, part of your working system. The same way you have, HR processes and all of those things, and you have your HMOs and all of that. Then you want to embed this in all of it. And it's not just about healthcare. Because the thing is, a lot of people look at mental health and they think it's just a healthcare issue. And I'm like, no, it's an economic issue, it's a political issue, it's a social issue, it's a psychological issue, it's a health, whatever area, it is an issue. So you're building your company, you all need to try and embed, mental health, mental practices, and to begin to rethink work in an age where mental health consequences are very, very glaring before our eyes and things like that. So for me, those are just a few things. I mean, there are obviously more ways. There's a way of tackling the legislative aspects as well. There's a way of going from the grassroots as well, understanding the role of traditional media and lay counseling and things like that. The people on the foot, right in communities, trying to change these narratives and things like that, I feel is very important. But I think one more thing before I wrap up the point is that where people have had a distorted point of view of mental health, we need to go back to those places and begin to change where people were conditioned. So for example, a lot of us don't even know how and why we're conditioned to look at mental health in a very stiff and very uptight way. But the thing is that we read it in newspapers, we listen to it on radio, we laughed at it during, in comedy shows, we watched it in Nollywood, we sang it in songs as, disses and stuff like that. So we literally grew up in an environment where anything that was related to mental health was negative, and it had to do with this extreme picture. Now, what is important for us to do is that we go back to those places, to the media, to the radio, like the newspaper, the radio. We need to go back to our movies and all of those things to begin to change the narrative there, because that's what we still consume that continues to reprogram us every single day.
I mean, that's so apt. I saw your interview with your speech at the UN. I mean, that was quite emotional. I was really touched by that speech. But I took up a social media influencer in the course of the week, and I said, because when we say that we're complaining about rape, and yet we're churning out content that is suggestive, content that is encouraging such things, wordings that encourages such things, and unfortunately we don't have a census board that can regulate what we consume. So I think it's a bit hypocritical when someone sings a song that encourages some illicit wordings, no to rape. Can I have your thoughts about the issue of rape? I know it was not meant to be in a discussion, but I always like to allow things to flow in my show. The issue of rape, the impact of music, the impact of the society. Maybe I should allow you just because it's been very worrisome for me, like it's been for you.
Yeah, so hard to talk about mental health without talking about sexual violence, because who have come in for some mental health response have encountered or have experienced some level of sexual violence in their lifetime, and apparently that data is reflective of the global data as well. 7 in 10 women, for example. It's really tough. It's tough because, again, it's such a multi-layered issue of some sort. On the one hand, we are, like you've said, there are certain things that have created a certain groups of us. Again, when people talk about, for example, when people talk about patriarchy, a lot of men, it's not about men, it's about a system that enables certain kinds of behaviors and allows those behaviors to go unchecked. In fact, it enables them, and then there are no consequences for it. So that's what we really mean, and it's about really dismantling that, because that is the kind of place that enables the rape culture, sort of enables rape apologists and things like that. But it is on this also understanding that, I mean, between you and I, the mind and everything, we understand that people have been programmed for such a long time. We understand that people have, they have heard things in songs, they have watched certain kinds of movies, they have done those things that have become normalized in your internal environment, that you don't understand. You don't even have any choice, any conscious choice in how you express that. And we need to understand the role of those things. Although I'm always very careful in terms of understanding morality, based to perspective, and it's subject to different people's, values and beliefs and things. However, if we have a law of the land, for example, and we believe in, for example, fundamental human rights and all of those things, I think it is so important that we begin to understand that actions have to have consequences all the time. So the rape issue, one of the biggest parts of the rape issue that we're not dealing with is how to prove consent. And I've had this conversation with my dear friend Zil, and it is something that we have spoken about, because I mean, beyond all of what has happened in the past month, there are people on the back end who are not just following the trend. We are in for the long haul. So whilst all of the good noise and the trending topics are going on, we need to also sit down and ask ourselves, how can we change the system? How can we create better laws? How can we create laws that actually protect people and ensure that, because we don't have enough precedents in Nigeria for persecution. You know, you're telling me that this year alone, there has been, what, 717 rape cases. And in the entire history of Nigeria, we have barely prosecuted 65. So where do we start? We don't have precedents because there is a loophole in the law that can show that, yes, there was. So how do I prove that I withdrew consent? That's the problem. And then it goes back to the victim, because now the victim has to be the one who something did not happen. How do you prove a negative? How do you prove a non-existent thing? You know, so it's quite multi-layered, because yes, we have the legislation. It's not even domesticated across Nigeria. A lot of the northern states have not domesticated it. They're still running with the penal code, which quite frankly is very problematic. There is a religious aspect to it, which of course we've touched on, but it's such a major issue. But I think, again, it is a we need to address the problem from multiple areas. We need to start talking about sex education and consent classes and all of that in schools, because we need to start the programming early, because a lot of adult men do not even know what consent is. They don't know what power dynamics are and why you can hold a certain kind of power and you cannot tell me that their consent was given. It was not given, because you held a certain kind of power that by default coerced somebody to say yes. And that yes is not valid because the power dynamics were not distributed properly. You know, so it's really tough. It's really tough because it's a systemic thing. We can start with the law, we can start with domestication, but we need to reorient everybody. We need to go to the schools, we need to train the police, train responders and things like that. And then we need to scale all of that into workplaces, into local languages, through traditional leaders. I'm saying these three because these are key influential people that we tend to leave out of the conversations, but they do wield a lot of power, especially to the grassroots, which is the majority.
Absolutely. I mean, I totally agree with you. I've said over and over that I don't think that the problem of Nigeria is corruption. Some people have taken me up on that, but until they hear the caveat to it, I think that the problem of Nigeria is impunity. Because people seem to get away with a lot of things. If we can deal with impunity, and there are no consequences to the action. So for me, a lot of people said, oh, your voice is needed. Why are you not posting things on rape? I said, it's good to do it, but I'm also trying to put the balance to it, because a lot of people doing it are even hypocritical. The young people to live a dysfunctional life, then you are coming back to say no to
you know,
so like I'm saying, I was saying, like, yes, it's back now. It's back now. Okay, so I think it, like you said, it's multi-layered. The judiciary, when the radio station invited me and they were trying to put me on the spot, and they're like, what's my stand? I was like, my stand is so inconsequential, because if we look at the different layers from the judiciary to the policemen, that when you get to the police station, they will tell you to go buy a pen, go buy a notepad, ask you to drop some amount of money before they can take your case. All of the multi-layered issues for me says to us that it's systemic. The issue of impunity is very systemic. It's embedded in the fabric of our society. And like you said, I think all of us just need to play our part. You know, especially also, I think that religious leaders also needs to embrace it more. And I mean, whether you like it or not, you might not bear any title of being an imam or whatever title it is in your faith, but I believe that as a social media influencer also, I must thank you for making your voice loud, especially in that space, because maybe I'll just talk a bit about my own side, my own type of religion, then you can talk about yours. In our own type of religion, I see people say things like, oh, mental health issues is a spiritual problem. We'll cast out that devil out of the person. You know, I've had these conversations with pastors. I mean, the way the way you're chuckling is the way I also do too, because I'm like, why are you an ignoramus? Why are you so ignorant? You know? So all of that narrative in our own side got me curious. And for me being bivocational, I've been able to see the two sides. And one of the data of one of the rehabs that I had access to, you know, of course, you know, our job is very confidential. So we were able to extract just the number, no gender, no name. I mean, no name, no, nothing exposing. But I realized that people who have very strong religious beliefs are more in rehabs than people who are even atheists. So that says something to me about the narrative. Something has to change in the narrative, so that I don't know about you, but I think that we need a collaborative narrative out there where the religious leaders are advocates, where we have policemen who are advocates, we have the legal team that are advocates, we have people in government who also are standing like advocates, so that we can all collaborate and, number one, do a proper education to the populace. Number two, ensure that there is consequence for their action. Actually, that's what they rape, and also for mental health issues. You know, also in our own faith, we have to scale up, you know, things to look at when people want to marry. You know, because now there is an uprise of mental health issues. So before we used to do genotype, do blood group, do and pregnant and all of that. Now we have to include mental health. Why? Because there are a lot of people who are not even aware that they have certain mental health challenges that is even generational.
I feel like you guys are even doing a lot of work and I'm not even calling out the Muslims. I know that Muslims will say that I've called Muslims out enough this past month. I mean, I'm not even ready for anybody to start threatening me. You guys, sorry. You know, but I feel like you guys are even doing a whole lot. Like the churches have become a hub. I mean, I get my antidepressants from a church. Like every time I'm in Lagos, I get my meds from the church. You know, it's quite interesting. But I feel like you guys are even doing a lot more in ensuring that you are creating these kinds of, at least you're making it very inclusive into your space, into your religious space. You know, I know about counseling within, and not just like pastoral counseling. Yeah. I mean like actual, you know, psychotherapy or CBT and all of that kinds of therapy that go on within the churches and all of that. And I feel like it's been, I mean, on the Muslim side, people also say, why didn't you go and do? And I'm like, yo, I don't even want any like your Allah is too much. Can you just go? You know, but I feel like we don't do that enough on our side. But I think beyond that, and I've had this conversation with the Catholics regarding marriage and, you know, mental health and trying to talk about it. And I keep saying, like, you know, the truth is I'm not particularly like, I'm not quite in favor of it because of the way it is framed. Because, okay, so maybe I'm taking it a bit personally. Maybe I'll take it a bit personally because I live with something as well. Something that has been diagnosed and all of that. So maybe that's why it feels a little uncomfortable, because we already live in a society where there's a lot of finger pointing. You know, I do know, and I speak boldly about, you know, my ex relationship and how one of the issues that came up was my mental health and their family saying a couple of things. And while that may hurt, it is testament to show that we haven't reached that level of understanding where, again, we're making it about conditions and labels and not a lot about, you know, programming, things that we have learned over time. Because the truth is, every single person is living with some level of trauma, whether it's neglect, whether it's loss of a loved one, whether it's the family dynamics you were born into, whether it's the environmental system, the social issues that you were exposed to. We're all living with that. And what happens with your mental health is that it's really just a consequence of all of those things. You know, it's just that for some people, it may start to show much later in their lives. For some other people, they may never know that, oh, I have anger issues. Oh, I'm very withdrawn. Oh, I don't like this kind of thing. And it just sounds like, oh, that's how you are. But really, they're deep trauma responses. And that's really what mental health conditions are. We're all just going through certain levels of traumatic experiences or the consequences of past traumas that are manifesting like differently in our lives and things like that. So a lot of times I feel like we need to be very careful in how we're responding, because it might create even more problem that has to do with a lot of finger pointing, because we haven't really understood that mental health is something that affects us all. We still look at it like it's those people and it's we people, and then it looks like, oh, the ones that are diagnosed, wait, hold on, give your own 5 years, you will soon be diagnosed, don't worry, kind of thing. And, and it's super interesting because everybody needs to understand it's a we thing. It's not always a label or, you know, all of that. It's just really a we thing. Yeah.
Thank you for your kind words. Yes, yeah, we're probably doing quite some things in that area, but I must also tell you that we still have certain barriers. Like you said earlier, it's very systemic. The layer from the religious end, if that can be, you know, scraped off, we will make tremendous progress in the mental health space. There are loads of people out there who just can't connect the fact that seeking spiritual help and seeking professional help is collaborative in nature. So a lot of people still feel, no. If you're going to trust God for your healing, trust God for your healing. If you're going to see a medical doctor, see a medical doctor.
They don't trust God for their healing from malaria. Or when you take Panadol for your headache.
Increase the volume, you know. And largely because, you know, where our society is largely hypocritical, you know, so that gives the narrative some push, you know. So let me take the conversation to the next. That we live in a very dysfunctional environment. Yesterday I was having a meeting with men, and my guest was explaining how we've had very negative narrative raising boys. You know, an average boy is raised to think that a woman is a sex object. An average boy is raised to think that a woman is, or is meant to be superior to the man, is meant to be seen as someone who naturally should have authority. And it reminded us of a story of a particular a guy rather, who was beaten in a particular school. It was in social media at some point. And the guy, because the guy was first in the first term, the lady was second. Then when the lady became first in the second time, the guy became second. He couldn't stand it because they had pumped him up to say that a man should be superior to a woman. Having said that, I realized that, that story, I remember that in that story, the guy poured acid into the bottle of the particular lady, yes, you know, before he was caught. And the intention was to get rid of the lady because the girl the girl was ahead of him in class. All of that narrative, plus the fact that in an average home, many parents don't understand parenting, coupled with the fact that in an average home, some people even think that when you grow up as a man, you don't cry. You are meant to be a chauvinist. You are meant to be aggressive. Your biceps. So boys are raised to become human doings, not human beings. And all of that narrative, for me, creates some level of dysfunctionality. What's the impact from your profession and from your experience? What's the impact of a dysfunctional environment, number one, on mental health? What's the impact of dysfunctional environment on marriages and on our emotions?
So yeah, that's a fantastic question. So I think for me, when I really think about it, it's back to what we were saying about, you know, everybody carrying some level of trauma. And when it's unresolved and we're unaware and we're not able to build that self-awareness in order to, you know, sort of adjust or heal or whatever word anybody feels comfortable with, we make it seem like once you just become a parent or once you just get married, it's like you shut the door on one aspect of your life and you open a fresh door. But that's not what happens. We carry all our traumas and all our life experiences with us. you know. So
Yeah.
when you do become a parent, you are really carrying that level of trauma, and which a lot of times we also tag as dysfunction, because when you have gone through, you know, layered trauma all through your life, which a lot of us have, perhaps a majority of us, not
Yes.
all,
You
what
can say
happens
that
is that it
again.
becomes a dysfunction, you know, in that sense of it, whether it's biologically or psychologically. And we go on like that, and then we get into, you know, relationships, and then we rebuild a traumatic and dysfunctional environment within that relationship. And then what happens is that, well, we bring children into it, and we don't know any better, because they're going to pick it up, whether in the environment, in the psychology, in the biology, or whatever it is. They're going to pick it up, and then we continue that generational dysfunction. So it's not really rocket science that's happening. It's not like something just drops families or parents or anything. It's the fact that, again, we are not addressing the most basic issue, which is that everybody's carrying some level of trauma. We are not addressing the fact that, you know, when, you know, people say hurting people hurt people, or, you know, dysfunctional parents will, you know, raise dysfunctional children and things like that. We don't understand the economic cost of that. We don't understand the psychological cost of that. We don't understand the emotional cost of that to the environment, because that's where you continue to see more and more vices, because there is a ripple effect across board. So for me, I mean, I really look at those things as simple as that. Even though it may seem very simplistic, that's really what it is. It's realizing that we are indeed sweeping a lot of things under the carpet. We are not normalizing, you know, everybody dealing with their issues. It's just a case of, yeah, it's done, you know, it's in the past, you know, let's move on. And I'm like, yo, it doesn't work that way. Like, we all wish it worked that way, right? Like, I wish I could just like shut the door on some of the things and move on. But the awareness helps me even become more conscious. The awareness affects the kind of relationships that I build. The awareness helps me to, you know, take the right decisions and things like that. But if you're not even going to accept that something even exists, then you don't have the power. You've given away the power to actually address it. So that is where I believe, you know, the root of all of this is. And we will continue to see that emotional strain on the society. We'll continue to see things happen where we're always saying, oh my God, there's something happening and this and that, because we're attacking what I call like the root leaves analogy. We're attacking the leaves and the branches, but we're not really going down to the roots. You know, we never really
Thank
go
you.
down, because it's so easy. It seems like what we look at the immediate problem, and then we try to address the immediate problem as against going to the roots of the issue and then like nipping it in the bud. And that's where we are, especially as a country in Nigeria, because again, we have a top-down issue with terms of leadership, and definitely have an issue from bottom up, because yeah, we are people, we are the leaders, you know, in fact, yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. In NLP, one of the very outstanding things I learned in NLP is the fact that our opinions, our beliefs, our values are inherited. But I've shared this on several platforms, how we have inherited opinions that we never questioned, and yet we're working with confident ignorance. And that's worrisome for me, because yesterday we were highlighting the issues that men have. We're to talk about the fact that men live in denial, men live in self-deception, men live in delusion. I mean, there's several men who are delusionary, and that's not even a problem. Where the greater problem is that they're unaware. So they have what I call, thank you, confident ignorance. When you are ignorant, it's fine. When you display ignorance with confidence, it becomes worrisome. So having said that, how do you think we can reduce the impact of unresolved trauma in the lives of the Generation Z, the upwardly? In fact, Generation Z is even a bit scary for me, because their values are just totally eroded. They don't want the process; they want the promise. They don't.
Right. I love Gen Z. They came exactly at the right time for the world. And I know that.
Yeah,
I know a lot of people, and a lot of people find them very radical and very wild, and they're like, you know what, we don't want to sit at the table, we just want to flip the table kind of thing. And that's exactly why I like them. I feel like they're better suited for the time right now. It makes sense how they think. I think we need to understand why, and we need to leverage what they have, because they're very fearless. You begin to see the traits of Gen Z in the younger millennials. So people more like, 25, 26, or 26, 27, a little bit younger than me. You know, I feel like I'm getting older now, you know, so we begin to see, we begin to see all of that like in the late millennials and then all to Gen Z. But we need them. I understand that it's very worrisome because they just feel like, but you have to understand that we all are picking up these collective traits because of the time in which we are born. Gen Z have been born into a different era. It's not the era of the millennials. And I know that we feel like we weren't born, like millennials weren't born that long ago. But the world, the way it is changing now, is changing at a much faster rate than it was changing like 5-10 years ago. You know, things are moving quite fast. We're just half year, and it feels like 2 years has happened this year already. Like, yo, things are happening, and these people are in an era where everything has to be instant, everything has to be quick because the world has problems and complex issues, and we need to respond that fast. There's a sense of urgency, and you know, things like that. And it's so important because, I mean, Gen Z, I love them. I love them. Okay. Anyways, back to the question. So,
Yeah.
I feel like in order to normalize addressing traumas and things like that, again, it's a system. You know why I say it's a system? And I feel like, you know, we won't get too far. I mean, it's easy for you to say you do your bits at home, I'll do my bits marketization, and we'll all do our bits and all of that. But it doesn't change the system. You know why? Because we are in a community, however we want to look at it. Whatever you learn here, you're still going to go out and all of those other things are still going to affect you. So whether you think you're doing your child good by ensuring that they teach something in their school, they're still going to go out and interact with another child from a public school where they are barely even learning the barest minimum. And then you think that they're learning like what, maybe sexual education or sex education or stuff like that. You're not, you know, so again, it is systemic. We need to embed these things within the system. And in the system, the vast majority will still go from the family, within the community. You will go to, maybe you visit some level of healthcare, a religious institution, you will go to a school. So these are basic institutions that we all tend to pass through of some sort in our growing up. And these are places that we get our socialization from. And I feel like it is so important that we embed things there, you know. So we need to now also, it's not just enough for us to identify the places that we need to embed things, because I think we know where we need to embed things, but it's also what are we embedding there? A lot of times we are too, it's a very tokenistic approach, if just to use that word for lack of a better word. We just want to show that we're performing this performative thing that we just do, like, okay, we are put here in the primary health. I'm like, yo, we need to be more holistic about how we think about mental health. It's not just about diagnosing and rehabilitating and curing people, but understanding that people need to realize that there are things within their environment that cause them to, over a period of time, that upset their internal environment and cause them to express certain kinds of emotions or thoughts or behaviors. And then we need to begin to work from there. Because, and I know it sounds very abstract for anybody that may be listening, get there in this world. Like, how are we even going to do that? Because the UK is probably not even there yet per se, or the US, which we like to use like our poster model, you know, countries and things like that. But that is, for me, I'm about it. It's very easy to put things and say, let's start from here, let's start from here, let's start from here. All well and good, as long as we know where we're working towards, because we really need to begin to change that idea that it's all about an illness. And a lot of times, like for the past year and a half or so, I've always told people, like I tell people, I don't longer look at mental health conditions as illness. I look at them as disabilities, and with a disability, it's not about the person, it's about the environment. So how can you fix the environment to adapt to the person, whilst trying to get the person to perform on an equal basis with other people, you know, and all of that. So that's really how I see it. It's ensuring that in those places that we have identified, whether it's school, religious institution, primary healthcare centers, community centers, and all of those things, in those key institutions, we need to embed, you know, mental health care, holistic mental health care, trauma response, crisis counseling, grief counseling, you know, things like that, that are more psychosocial in nature and address the whole person, as against just taking a part and then like diagnosing and all of that. So yeah, that's really how I see it, honestly.
Okay. I mean, thank you for your perspective, and thank you for not hiding from the fact that you have that that very new connection to Generation Z. I mean, I like your response to you know. But you know, you will agree with me that the issues of values being eroded cannot be, you know, be said to be just because of the generation. I think it's a progressive I think that
But
was because
what's wrong with their values? Pastor, what's wrong with their values? Like, I mean, well, you know how it is with values. Sometimes values are not good or bad depending
yeah,
on the situation, you know. So again, I look at it as the same things that we complain about Gen Z. I see it. Like sometimes I see it in my cousins, I'm like, man, this one's not even ready for the world. Or this one, I'm not even serious. Life will so humble you, you will know. That's my kind of predisposition towards them sometimes. But I feel like those same things that they hold that may come across as threatening or come across as, you know, bad values, or these things are setting you up for failure and all of that, are the same things that are highly needed at the moment. That fearlessness, that sense of urgency. We know, you know, we can channel those same values and still achieve what we call like positive social change or positive results and things like that. You know, I am not going to discount the fact that some of it is worrying. I feel like, again, everything that we look at that is a negative consequence is coming from something precedes it, right? You know, and that is not, it's not happening in isolation. You know, we're all feeling the effects. It's just that we're feeling the effect because of the time in which they are born, because their reality is not our reality, and my reality is not necessarily your reality, sir. You know,
that's right. That's right.
You know, so we need to understand where all of this is, you know, and I wouldn't really, you know, you know, I still give them a benefit of doubt because I feel like we really need them.
I get you, but I'm sure you know that they can be a lot better. So why we while we wait for anyone that has questions to please type in the questions. So as we begin to round up, what are your parting words for, we spoke about a lot of things. What are your parting words for Generation Z? Because you're doing that amazing, you're doing exceptional things out there. So proud of you. Your parting word for Generation Z, your parting word for religious leaders out there, and your parting words for maybe someone in government is listening. How do we get policies to a point where they can be entrenched in our system for the issue of mental health?
So Gen Z, religious leaders, and policymakers. So I'm going to start with policymakers. Like, if you're listening, y'all need to like begin to listen to your people. Like, I feel like we have too much expectation for our policymakers. I'm sorry, and they probably already know that I tend to like get on their nerves or step on the foot, like some of their toes. That's okay. We'll all still converge at National Assembly. That's fine. But I feel like you cannot give what you don't have. You don't know what the issues are. You don't know, you're not familiar with how certain issues are affecting the grassroots. You don't know, you know, it's a different time. You are catering to a population of over 60% of people that are under 35. You don't know that reality, you know. So the earlier you are aware that you don't know, the better, so that you can surround yourself and equip yourself with the right people who begin to set you up for success. Because ultimately, governance is the leadership, right? You're trying to lead people, whatever you're doing in terms of policy or legislation or whatever should be a reflection of the people's interest and not exactly your own self-interest. But sadly, we kind of get it the other way around here. For mental health, there is a bill before the National Assembly, the mental health bill, the mental health and substance abuse bill. They already know what our recommendations are. We spoke at the National Assembly regarding this. And it is just important that we begin to understand why our laws should not. So I feel like a lot of times we bring out laws and they're already outdated by the time they come out, especially when it comes to healthcare and things like that. But I feel like we also need to balance understanding aspirational laws. And I know that a lot of times can be quite shaky for a lot of people because it feels like we don't have the structures to execute that. But I'm like, that's the thing. It should be something more aspirational. It should be something that is still relevant in another 5 years because you're constantly trying to build it towards, you know, realizing the fullest extent of that particular law or policy. You know, so I would also tell, you know, the policymaker, please be aware of human rights consequences of mental health and ensuring that you have a human rights respecting mental health law. I mean, we've done a whole memo on this. We've sat with the Senate Committee on Health regarding mental health. You need to understand the urgency, not just for the people that you see on social media, but more importantly for the people that you do not get to see, the furthest behind, the most vulnerable, the most marginalized, you know, people and all of that. That is very important. Now, if I go down to the religious institutions and the religious leaders, look, you guys by far are even more influential than the president, because president can be saying his own. You are in the keeper hosted that is just doing, like, people are gathering and you are a fighter, or you are like, you don't understand. Religious leaders are influencers. Forget all the social media and religious leaders in this country need to understand their power, and I feel like sometimes they sit on it because they know the power that they wield. And it's so important that we begin to demand a lot of accountability, because if you're not having certain kinds of conversations within your institutions, then you're being complicit and negligent. And that is so important, because you tell them what you want to tell them based on your own benefits, or what the church benefits, or what the mosque benefits, or whatever the people behind benefit, but you are not trying to do what is important for the general society. And if there is a sexual violence pandemic going on, or there is a mental health crisis, or a pandemic that is brewing in the mental health space that has not truly been realized or talked about, then you have a responsibility to begin to normalize these conversations within your own institutions. However you want to do it, that's up to you. You're the influencer, go do it, but ensure that you include people who, number one, have experienced it, and people who are experts in it. Third, Gen Z. You guys are like real life superheroes. You need to understand what your value is. Forget everything. And if you're a Nigerian Gen Z, a lot of times you might think like your power is limited because you're so young and all of that. You're not that young. You know, I sit on the Global Youth Advisory Board for Viacom. That's the organization that, you know, that owns MTV, BET, Nickelodeon, and the rest. And I'm the oldest. I'm the oldest. Every other person is less than 25. Yeah, I'm the oldest. You know, I'm the only African, and I'm the oldest, and that's because generally they believe that, and it is believed that, and it is indeed evidence that Africans start late. You know, so they try to balance that, because what I may be achieving and be experiencing at 28, somebody who is 16 or 18 has already started to do that. I mean, these are people that I sit on boards with people who had, you know, passed 26 bills in the United States or things like that. I'm like, yo, like, oh my days, how do you do that? You know, that kind of thing. So you guys have the power. If you're Nigerian and you're Gen Z, you need to begin to understand that you're not just Gen Z Nigerian, you're Gen Z globally. Look at Gen Z globally and see what Gen Zs are doing. You can channel all of this energy and this urgency and this vibe and this, you know, short attention span and all of those things that people tend to point their fingers at you for. You can channel all of that energy for positive good, because at the moment we need fresh thinking, we need quick thinking, because the problems are very complex and they are changing every single day. There are things that are moving that we need to address, and Gen Z have the energy, the foresight. They have a peculiar experience that positions them properly, and that's why we millennials and Gen Z need to work together, because we know the system that is right now. They don't know the system, which is fantastic, because at least they can see very clearly, you know. So that is it. That is it for me.
Okay, thank you so much. Someone is asking the question here before Mr. Light begins to do a countdown. Hi, is your organization working in the northern Nigeria? If yes, which part? Which part, if yes? So Southern North is asking that. Yeah. Okay. So
yes, so we prior to, of course, COVID and everything, we've worked in northeastern Nigeria. So I've done quite some work in Adamawa and Maiduguri. But beyond that, because of course COVID and everything, we're virtual, 100% virtual now. We have a team in Lagos, we have a team in Abuja. So yeah, that's all I can give you for now. But everything is virtual, so you can go on our social media at She Writes Woman, and you can check out all of the resources and that, you know, help clients and things like that.